This is really about a journey. And the journey for me started 5 years ago when I went to the local Jewel in Barrington, Illinois, and my favorite cookies had been discontinued. I asked for them to reorder them. They said they would. After 2 requests and no response, I decided I'd approach the manufacturer's website, find out where else I could go to buy the cookies. It turned out their list was no more helpful. I couldn't find the cookies anyplace. Eventually decided to spend $25 and get free shipping on Amazon. At that point, I realized, after 25 years plus in consulting, that I was reinventing how I was grocery shopping as a result of interacting with digital. And frankly, that's what led me to create or co-create Brick Meets Click. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about the challenge of transitioning through this digital approach. You have a leg up on this for a couple reasons. First of all, category management is a standard business process that you're already beginning to evolve in Category Management 2.0 and all the good work that Gordon Wade and many others did in that regard. So there's an advantage you have. On the other hand, we're still at a point where there's a tremendous amount we just don't know. Still early days, and we're still learning. So I thought, given this sort of late time in the day, I was going to do just 2 things. Number one, try to blend or try to bring what I call the blended retail experience into perspective for you. In other words, what's the context within which you're going to be making this journey into digital? And then secondly, answer some questions from a category management point of view. What are you going to do to respond? And to prepare to do that, I actually talked to a couple of category managers, Stephanie Halley from Wrigley, and a couple of others who I work with on somewhat of a regular basis. So I hope I've got some practical take-home benefits for you. Michael was nice enough to mention the website. It is brickmeetsclick.com. And while we are a consulting firm, this website is dedicated to providing non-commercial, thought-leading input that anyone can get free of charge, no block, no requirements. We've got posts that put developments into context. There are 2 major pieces of shopper research on there you can pull down at no cost. I guess you have to register, that's all. And now, more recently, we've actually expanded in 2 areas. We're doing some benchmarking with online transactions. Today have 17 retailers and several hundred stores in that process. And we're in the process of also creating an online learning lab, and I may say just a little bit more about that later. So I want to help you chart a route towards digital merchandising. Now, digital merchandising is exactly like regular merchandising in its function in that it is what you do to get somebody to buy from you. So this is online. What do you do to get somebody to buy from you? And probably the best example of this, I have to kind of reach outside of traditional retailing. If you take a look, how many of you have seen the ads for Blue Apron? Anybody see the Blue Apron ads? See the way that the items are presented, the experience is developed, and by the time you're 3/4 through the ad, you're salivating and wanting to sign up. That is going through digital merchandising to create a sale. And digital merchandising also has some additional flexibilities, which I think are pretty obvious, but they're worth enumerating. Number one, it's greater flexibility. With digital merchandising, instead of having a flat piece of paper, you can connect to all sorts of other content. You can connect to videos, you can connect to third parties, you can do all sorts of other things. The reach of digital merchandising is extensive. Merchandising in the store has just one place and time where it occurs. In the digital environment, you've got some pre-shop, some in-shop, some post-shop. And lastly, it's a little like the virtual reality that Michael was talking about. It really doesn't require much labor, and there's certainly no shrink involved when you're building these merchandising displays. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about. And Gordon Wade sort of challenged me. He said, Bill, you've been spending most of your life for the last 4 years studying this. Provide a framework to help people think about how to approach digital. And so I wanted to put this little diagram up here to help you realize that while there's a tremendous amount of attention, and understandably so, on the transactional parts of digital, that is the online shopping part, that's less than 5% of the business. 95% of the business is still happening in store, and a significant fraction of that business is influenced one way or the other by digital. Somebody might have gone to a Facebook page, they may have seen some other references, followed some ads. So we've got an environment here where you've got two interrelated activities, both digital, one influence and one online, one of which, online shopping, has got, in my opinion, a disproportionate amount of attention. So as you think about this, be thinking about digital merchandising, of course how it applies online, but also how it applies in the store. So let's just say a little bit more about each of those aspects of digital. First, digital influence, and I don't think there's any question that traditional vehicles are being replaced or at least superseded by digital vehicles. I was talking with someone on the phone just in the last week, and I said, well, yeah, something like Flip that's basically digitizing the circular. And he said, what's Flip? I guess I'll go on the site. Well, Flip has a tremendous presence in North America already. They've basically remodeled the business model of circulars. They've digitized circulars and have changed the way people interact with circulars. And then Pinterest. I had a conversation over the weekend with a gal who every day goes to Pinterest for inspiration about meals. A third party, not a recipe site, she goes to Pinterest. Why? Because it is so visually impactful. So the other side of the coin is this online shopping. And I just want to put this in perspective for you because I think it's easy to misunderstand what's happening. So the numbers I've got up on here are the percentage of transactions from a recent survey we did at Brick Meets Click of about 12,500 connected grocery shoppers. And the numbers in blue, the 10%, indicate that 10% of those transactions were done with what we call multi-channel supermarkets. Another 6% of those transactions were done with what we call direct competition or direct competitors, which would be Peapod, Amazon Fresh, Fresh Direct, place where you can get the whole grocery order. And 84% of the trips were done with what we call basket bandits, trips done with much narrower websites, not the whole complete shopping trip, but ones where a lot of people are directing themselves today. And of those 48%, or of the 84%, 48% of those trips were to Amazon. And this isn't including Amazon Fresh. This is all of the other Amazon platforms. So the point here is that most online shopping today is not happening with the brick and mortar supermarkets that you are primarily affiliated with. And in some respects, you might say, who cares? This really isn't a big deal anyway. Well, I'm here to tell you that you probably should be caring, and I think it really is a big deal. And it's a big deal because what I've just described to you shows that the traditional channel is in a dogfight for affecting how people will shop in the future. People are working today to help customers like me 5 years ago reinvent the way they shop for groceries. And there are many competitors that are working on that very aggressively, not as a side issue, but as a primary issue. And it's not just Amazon. Google wants its piece of the action. Facebook wants its piece of the action. Apple's got its pay. There are plenty of others as well. So this is a serious, I'm not going to say existential, but a serious piece of competition. So I did say there's some facets of what's happening in the retail business, which I think characterize blended retail, digital and traditional. And one of the things that's going to be characterizing this sort of new situation is different kinds of food stores. Now, I put up names and characteristics here, not because I say they're necessarily going to be dominant, but because each one of these retail banners demonstrates a feature which I think is going to be absolutely required for success in the retail business. So in Aldi, you have rock bottom efficiency. I don't think anybody could argue with that. In Green Zebra, a little startup in Portland, Oregon, you've got incredible productivity of shelf space. Their stores are on average 5,000 square feet. So can you imagine how quickly they get to high sales per square foot in that environment? You take a look at Wawa, particularly the Wawa stores in Florida, you know exactly what that banner is. It's very purposeful. It's very clear why one would go to that store. It's not a general purpose store. It's a place to take care of your immediate consumption. And then I'm really impressed with the new Lowe's banner stores in North Carolina. They're very attractive. There are lots of reasons to visit. So those four attributes have got to begin to characterize more and more of our stores. And if our stores don't hit on 3 of those or 4 of those, they're just not really going to be able to perform effectively in the environment we're talking about. Second characteristic of the retail environment is shoppers are more intentional. This is a function of 2 things, in my opinion. Number one, they've got more choices. So when they have more choices, they don't have to accept. They can look around until they find what they want. And as a result, and maybe even going in because they know they're in charge, they are just less willing to compromise. So this is a situation where customers are buying from us today, and we have to trigger that buying. We are really not selling to them like we used to. Third and last, in terms of the sort of circumstances we're operating in, keep in mind that Amazon is definitely going to be a part of the future. Let me sort of drain this slide for you so you can know what's happening. If there was, in our survey of the 12,500 shoppers, if there was just one shopping trip, 43% of those trips would have been to Amazon. If there were 2 trips in a month, this is in a month, 49% would have been to Amazon. If there were 6 trips in a month, so these people are really buying groceries online, 64% of those trips would go to Amazon. What's happening here? They have so many platforms in which to engage you, from Pantry to Subscribe and Save to Prime Now to Prime Family. It's just amazing. But while they haven't taken over the world, they're moving in the direction of trying to do that. And we don't know yet how successful they're going to be, but they are working on it relentlessly every day. An hour ago, somebody told me that they follow an agile form of development that allows them to, get this, turn out a new app almost every other minute to refine and progress. Now, that's a little scary for all of us, but that's the dedication you've got. So what's the takeaway from this? I think the only conclusion people in this room, and certainly I as a longstanding member of this community, can reach is that there's got to be a strengthening of the traditional channel, the wholesalers, the retailers, the suppliers, and the brand manufacturers, that will require a new, higher, and more effective level of collaboration. And I would argue that category management and digital merchandising are exactly the vehicles necessary to do that. I'd also argue that, as that old joke goes, we really have to hang together or we're going to hang separately. So just putting this in context, and I have spent most of the last 5 years studying this, ideally so you don't have to worry so much about it, here are 3 things, practical insights that have conditioned my thinking on where digital is going. First of all, digital elevates the importance of channel choice on the path to purchase. Right now, people have a lot of choices as to whether they want it right away, and usually that means going to the store or having it delivered on a short-term basis, or maybe it's not for 2 days, and that's just fine, since that's what we do here with our Prime subscription. So you've got this sort of compression going on in terms of channel choice being elevated and some real dynamics playing out. Second of all, digital shortens the distance between when a need is recognized and when a purchase decision is made. And obviously, as it shortens that time, it limits your ability to impact the decision on purchase. So you may be saying, well, what am I talking about here? I'm talking, for example, about a dash button. If you have a dash button on your refrigerator and you hit an item and order that item. That item will be shipped to you. The button is neutralized until the order arrives at your own home, and there was no thought about channel or brand. It was just, give me what I want. We are going in that direction. I'll say more about that in a second. The third insight is, and this may be just a little academic, but it's really important. The initial impact of digital happens at the margin. And what that means basically is that when digital influences behavior, it only influences behavior that's kind of in play. Now, you may say, well, maybe that's obvious or what have you, but here's why that's important. It means basically that when you assess the impact of digital and you see a growth of 15% of online sales in digital and 1.5% or 2% for our ComStore sales in the real world environment, it means that even though there's only a fraction of people who are buying or making that decision to go digital, it's more than enough to generate significant growth. And it's probably the only place where you're going to generate significant growth in a flat market. So you've got to love this as an opportunity. So in the category management business, what are 6 ways that you may be able to respond to this? What are some of the actions you could take? First is to begin to virtualize the appearance of the category. Make it look like what you know the consumers want it to look like. Now, the virtual reality that we saw several examples of on the floor out there, on the Solution Center floor, is a perfect example of how that process, and I know some retailers have moved aggressively in this area. I'm talking about changing planograms, and I'm also talking about changing the online presentation, because there's huge opportunities, probably bigger opportunities today in straightening the visual presentation out online than there is in the stores. Secondly, and this is probably what you have to start with as a retailer, but focusing on the loyalty of core customers. Digital highlights the fact, actually we knew this for a long time with loyalty cards, that 20% gives you 80%, but we didn't really know how to act on that. But now you can, and what you need to do is identify by name and identify the actions that will help you retain them. I think Kroger and Target do a really good job in this area. A lot of people are still not necessarily doing what they could be doing. Third, and this is somewhat along the lines of the online learning lab I was talking about, it's time to take targeted promotions to the next level. And there are 3 interrelated questions that need fresh answers. Who's the target, and how do we determine that? Secondly, what's the message that resonates with the target so that that target is prompted to buy? And then thirdly, probably most complicated, how do we communicate that? Because everybody, we missed a dinner party the other night because my wife called the people, I called the people, and they didn't check their phones. They were doing texting or something. So I mean, that's the world in which we live in. Fourth, simplify the buying experience. Now, you talk about a truism that most everybody would say to you, but what I would suggest to you is take a look at what consumers are doing today and notice that they are splitting replenishment purchases from new and sort of infrequently purchased product. And what that is telling us is that the traditional transaction that used to be conditioned or set by going to the store, and we go ahead and make both those purchases at the same time, is beginning to give way. And it's beginning to give way because people digitally have more options to do both those things. So if you're going to be selling replenishment items on a regular basis and also introducing new products, you've got a whole new set of learning in digital merchandising to set up the platforms. And for my money, just taking a look at the $3 billion that went to Dollar Shave Club, be sure you don't miss out on the replenishment side of this, because that's really where the pure gold of the transactions are today. Fifth, and I know this is something some of you have made progress on, but I'm arguing basically for an even more intense need state focus. One of the reasons I say that is when you get into the digital environment, to me the full name is need state driven shopping occasions. And when you look at need state driven shopping occasions, they're still conditioned generally by having to go to the store to execute it. But you don't have to do that anymore. And when you look to see the behavior online, you're seeing many additional shopping occasions that online can serve that stores could not. So be thinking about, as you develop your online capabilities and so forth, what can you do to target in more specifically and be more relevant with those shopping occasions. And then sixth and last, this is kind of an ongoing mission, transition from digital being an add-on to digital being an integral part of the business. This is hard. This has to do with the people side of it. It has to do with the tool side of it. There's a number of tasks to be done here. But the companies that are doing the best job are the ones that have begun to bring it as an integral part of the way they do their business in the future. And that takes a while. And it takes some investment. And it takes letting go of certain freedoms that previously existed in organizations. So be thinking hard about how to drive that kind of change in your company. So just going to check here. Not doing too badly on time. If you were to go home and say, okay, the presentation on charting a course to digital merchandising made sense to me, here are the three things that I would ask you to consider doing. First of all, and this can apply whether you're a retailer or a supplier or a brand, review how your products are presented online. I think if you take a clear-eyed look at the way products are presented today, online, digitally, you'll be very uncomfortable with the state of that presentation. Your planograms in the store, even partially executed, look a lot better than a lot of the catalogs online. Second of all, check out the quality and quantity of digital connections. And I talked with somebody a little earlier about this. What I'm really talking about is how much of your so-called customer identified transaction data, i.e. loyalty data, is really identified, accurately identified, and identified with somebody who you can talk to via an email or a phone number, and ideally both. You'll be horrified when you take a look at the difference between what senior management thinks and what the reality is in most companies. And then lastly, evaluate your content. I mean, content is king in the digital world. And there's some people who have some tremendous content, and there's some others who really have just not thought very much about it. It sort of looks like warmed over circular content. If you did just these three things and put them right and recognize that we're in a race to reinvent the way people shop, you would guarantee your place in that winning field, because very few people are doing just these three things. So you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to spend millions of dollars. Just be sure your products are presented properly, you know how to talk to the customers in a digital environment, and you've got content that really engages.